Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, distinguished speakers, Professor Sharmistha Chatterjee ma'am and Mr. Dustin Pickering sir, and dear participants, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar on comparative world literatures. We are honored to have such an illustrious panel of speakers who will share their expertise and insights on this fascinating topic. I would like to extend a special welcome to our chairperson and vice chancellor for gracing this occasion with her presence. Over the next 1.5 hours, we will engage in thought-provoking discussion, explore new ideas, gain a deeper understanding of the diverse world of literature. Let us come together to celebrate the richness of literary expression and the power of comparative perspectives. Now, without any delay, I would like to introduce Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, who is a distinguished academician, poet, and creative writer. She has had an illustrious academic career and previously held the position of Professor and Director, School of Foreign Languages, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. A prolific author, Professor Sahu has published 23 books, many of which are recognized as significant contributions to contemporary Indian English literature. Her works, widely appreciated for their depth and originality, have also made her a best-selling author on Amazon in the year 2024 and 2025. Professor Sahu's academic accomplishments include double gold medals at both the undergraduate and postgraduate levels, as well as the prestigious Literary Award and gold medal conferred by the Vice President of India in recognition of her outstanding contributions to English studies. In recent years, she has been the recipient of the several distinguished honors, including the Michael Madhusudan Academy Award in the year 2024, the Lifetime Achievement Award in the 2024, and the Tegar Samman in 2025, acknowledging her enduring influence on literature and education. Her most recent publication, Medusa, exemplifies her literary and intellectual versatilities. Professor Sahu's research interests encompass new literatures, critical theory, folklore, and cultural studies, through which she continues to advance critical scholarship and inspire academic discourse in the field of Indian English literature. So, now I would like to welcome Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, please, for her inaugural speech. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paramita, for this very generous introduction. I welcome my friend, a fellow poet, Dustin Pickering, and Professor Sharmistha, a very reputed scholar in West Bengal and, of course, all over the country, to our very important lecture series on comparative world literatures. If you have watched a few videos from our YouTube channel, probably you will have an idea that we have started this important and very seminal lecture series in the month of January, where the best brains of the country and the world, including the US and Germany and France and UK and many other places, they have already contributed important lectures to this series on comparative literature. And we are planning to introduce a department of comparative world literature. So that is why this kind of a lecture series, we hope that is going to help us to design our syllabus, and also the lectures will be a part of our archive of our YouTube channel. And about my engagement with both the eminent speakers today, Dustin Pickering critically engages with the pedagogy of uh, disability studies and many other fields which Dr. Paramita will formally introduce him. And he has a channel called Inkers, through which he takes interviews with many scholars all over the world. He has interviewed me a couple of times on Hindu studies and also on creative writing, and those two interviews uh, were very important interviews for me. And Dustin Pickering has been writing poetry, fiction, and critical research papers, and he has been substantially contributing to world literature. So today, the presence of Dustin Pickering is very apt and very interesting and important because he is an author not just of the US, he is recognized all over the world. And I hope that today, with his contribution, his research, and his discussion on comparative world literatures, he is going to enrich this lecture series, and my colleagues and students will be benefited by his contribution. I welcome you to Hindi University, West Bengal, India, to be a part of our journey of comparative literatures. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and I'm glad to see you here. I'm going to listen to your lecture from the recording because now I may have to log out because I'm traveling, you can see. And coming to Professor Sharmistha, I got introduced to her very recently, a few months ago, and I was very glad to see the commitment, the discipline with which she has been writing and doing her research and publishing. And she's also an administrator, she's a scholar, and she's truly, truly interdisciplinary. Her commitment to work was something that actually influenced me, impressed me. That is when I thought that she should be a part of our important lecture series on comparative world literatures, and it's very generous of her that despite her busy schedule, I had been to Alia University, have seen how busy she is. She's holding a series of lectures herself, but again, she agreed to be a part of our comparative world literatures lecture series. And today, I hope and I'm sure that her lecture is going to enrich all of us. Professor Sharmistha, thank you so very much for accepting our invitation and being here with us. You are a part of our family now. I welcome both the speakers, and I leave it to Dr. Paromita, the Public Relations Officer of Hindi University and also a teacher of Hindi and translation studies, to handle the entire program. Later on, I will watch the recording and then I will definitely give my comments for the YouTube channel. And for the time being, once again, welcome both of you and namaskar.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, moving forward, I would say it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, the famous poet of USA, Mr. Dustin Pickering, who is founder of Transcend Zero Press. He has contributed writing to Huffington Post, Los Angeles Review, The Statesman, India, Journal of Liberty and International Affairs, the Colorado Review, World Literature Today, Washington Journal, and several other publications. He is the author of numerous poetry collections and books, including Salt and Sorrow. He placed in the top 100 for the Imbeka Prize in 2021 and 2023, and was a finalist in Adelaide Literary Journal's first short fiction contest. He was longlisted for the Rahim Karim Word Prize in the year 2022 and given the honor of Knight of World Peace by the World Institute for Peace that same year. He hosts the popular interview series World Inkers Network on YouTube and co-founded World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Now, I would like to request Mr. Dustin Pickering, sir, for her very engaging lecture. Sir, please.
Well, welcome, Dustin.
Thank you for the
I'm
fabulous
glad that you are here.
introduction.
Yes, yes, you're going to speak now. Our registrar is here, Hindi University registrar, and I think the finance officer is also here, and the controller of examinations is here. So all the officers of the university are eagerly looking forward to listening to you. Please enjoy your talk, and I will get back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. The title of my lecture is Eternal Verities and Shared Purpose in the Humanities. Aldous Huxley, in his perennial philosophy, suggests there is an underlying truth beyond the material world we experience. This is part of his particular experience of the eternal verities, a term coined by the 18th century French philosopher Father Claude Bouffier. Father Bouffier, a Jesuit, uses the term to suggest common sense philosophy that embraces moral and humane values such as beauty, virtue, and compassion. Graham Collier, writing for Psychology Today, defines Father Bouffier's concept as, quote, imaginative and creative thoughts, feelings, and understandings which present us with what we would call moral and humane values, insights enabling us to know and feel the positivity of those attitudes and actions which ring true and good, and the negativity of those which ring false and harmful, end quote. Father Bouffier borrowed Descartes' method, but applied it to scholastic principles, uncovering psychological insights such as, quote, men disfigure themselves by effacing the impressions of nature, and, quote, a man may be an excellent logician and yet fall into considerable errors from an imperfect knowledge of first truths, end quote. The insights offered by Father Bouffier conceive the foundations of the eternal verities. Huxley writes, quote, to be enlightened is to be aware, always, of total reality and its immanent otherness, to be aware of it and yet remain in a condition to survive as an animal, end quote. This mingling of divine and animal being is both scientific and religious in nature. Darwin, as an example, notes the similarities between the animal kingdom and human society. There is continuity between humans and other animals and their emotional lives. There are transitional stages among species, not large gaps. And the differences among many animals are differences in degree rather than in kind. That's a quote from Darwin. The emotional categories of being are shared among species, and contemporary science notes the complexity of animals we once considered safe for exploitation. Insects are said to have subjective experience and selective attention toward their environment. Crows are also now believed to possess self-consciousness akin to humans. The scientific realization that crows have this kind of awareness happened in 2020. What these discoveries mark in relation to the eternal verities is there is some sense of scientific incompleteness as we probe nature empirically, indicating possibly that there is indeed a shared sense of eternal awareness. Max Planck, the founder of quantum theory, writes, quote, there can never be any real opposition between religion and science, for the one is the complement of the other. Every serious and reflective person realizes, I think, that the religious element in his nature must be recognized and cultivated if all the powers of the human soul are to act together in perfect balance and harmony, end quote. Religion is often seen as the collective enterprise of a culture realizing itself. Each culture presents the collective wisdom through archetypal narratives, poetic musings, origin stories, and rules for social cohesion. Myth is poetic by its own prowess. Max Weber, the sociologist, states about Puritan concepts of providence, quote, if that God, whose hand the Puritan sees in all the occurrences of life, shows one of his elect a chance of profit, he must do so for a reason, end quote. The Puritans and their religious ideology constructed the foundations of the United States and secured its temperament for ages to come. Anne Bradstreet, the first published American poet, composed verses upon the burning of our house July 10th, 1666. And here is a segment of the poem. Then coming out, behold a space, the flame consumed my dwelling place. And when I could no longer look, I blessed his name that gave and took, that laid my goods now in the dust. Yeah, so it was, and so 'twas just. It was his own, it was not mine. Note the use of a core biblical principle reflecting her religious zeal. Job 1:21 states, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away." On the subject of Christianity, modernism's prophet T.S. Eliot says, quote, "To me, religion has brought at least the perception of something above morals, and therefore extremely terrifying. It has brought me not happiness, but the sense of something above happiness, and therefore more terrifying than ordinary pain and misery, the very dark night and the desert. To me, the phrase to be damned for the glory of God is sense and not paradox. I had far rather walk as I do in daily terror of eternity than feel that this was only a children's game in which all the contestants would get equally worthless prizes in the end." End quote. Eliot is widely respected for his metaphysical verses, such as Four Quartets. This Eliot masterpiece opens with epigraphs reflecting the eternal verities in their essence. The first states, quote, "Although logos is common, the many live as if they had a wisdom of their own," expressing his faith in a deeper fundamental truth. Octavio Paz, Mexican ambassador to India from 1962 to 68, wrote in his The Labyrinth of Solitude, quote, "It is always difficult to give oneself up. Few persons anywhere ever succeed in doing so, and even fewer transcend the possessive stage to know love for what it actually is, a perpetual discovery, an immersion in the waters of reality, an unending recreation." End quote. This poetic musing reflects the concept of samsara, or possibly Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. Paz viewed poetry and literature hermetically as religious activity. Paz declared poetry's most noble aim as to attach ourselves to the world around us, to turn desire into love, to embrace finally what always evades us, what is beyond, and what is always there, the unspoken, the spirit, the soul. End quote. Samsara translates from Sanskrit into "it flows together," indicating cyclical karmic processes. Paz's wisdom digs deeper, reflecting on the social process, particularly of Christianity and Buddhism. He states, quote, "A religion that denies the realm of body exalts it in its most striking form, eroticism. But a religion that has made incarnation its central dogma spiritualizes and transfigures the flesh." End quote. This interpretation of religious social history offers insight into social processes of creation as well. Alfred North Whitehead writes in Process and Reality, quote, "The true method of discovery is like the flight of an aeroplane. It starts from the ground of particular observation. It makes a flight into the thin air of imaginative generalization, and it again lands for renewed observation rendered acute by rational interpretation." End quote. This process signifies the universal patterns of creative pursuits and intuition. As I return properly to scholasticism, its dialectics serve to bridge reason and faith, seeking to resolve contradiction. As we noted from Paz's insights into Christianity and Buddhism, cultural processes often lead to contradictions of form. It is as if knowledge existed in a circuitous manner, bending back to its origins in some kind of ascetic self-denial. Max Planck offers this tidbit of wisdom, quote, "Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature, and that is because in the last analysis, we ourselves are a part of the mystery that we are trying to solve," end quote. Our mortal limitations within a vast universe of unknowns lead us back toward ourselves. Atman reaches to Brahman to achieve salvation. Humans are created in God's image, and the Tao gives birth to one. These hidden truths indicate an underlying mystery to nature and the creative force that lies therein. The hidden aspect of the realm allows more interpretive discourse and action. Literature's quest to develop self-consciousness, abide by moral beauty and civic virtue, and mystify the relationship of these agnostic processes is something I call progressive revelation. In metaphorical terms, God's divine presence gradually hints toward truth and necessity over universal time. It is as if God is knitting a thread to lead us, blind humanity, through a labyrinth. The Minotaur we seek to slay is our own image, the knowledge that within us must die. In this journey, we care not to learn too much of the truth, for such is the extinction of the soul. In T.S. Eliot's words, quote, "Humankind cannot bear much reality." St. John of the Cross's dark night of the soul is Plato's sun, and we always would rather be in the cave than be blinded by the light. This seems to define Nietzschean nihilism. Nietzsche, who said, quote, "What does nihilism mean? That the supreme values devaluate themselves," suggesting the aforementioned process. Beings and processes, however, are not driven toward extinction by entropy. Rather, they are extinct by the pulsing, autonomous force which respires, exhaling and inhaling the reality we suffer and love. Our lives are on the pulse of God daily. Its throbbing, pinching motions underpin the body of being. Heidegger writes, in Being and Time, quote, "In great despair, for example, when all weight tends to dwindle away from things and the sense of things grows dark, the question looms," end quote. The question of why there are beings instead of none is the question he addresses here. We must wring our hands in frustration at the thought of solving this ultimate of mysteries. The seeming lack of answers to this fundamental question is a blessing in disguise because it permits us to write afresh, to create anew, to dream special things, to remake ourselves, to embrace art and science as we embark on discovery. However, we seem to follow the same form as patterns shape themselves and etch themselves on our conscience. Even though Nietzsche suggests that the commandment should be prescriptive, the proscriptive nature of "thou shalt not" delineates the conscience and suggests its limitations. Reflecting on limitations, I offered this verse from Sunflower Sutra by Allen Ginsberg. When did you look at your skin and decide you were an impotent, dirty old locomotive, the ghost of a locomotive, the specter and shade of a once powerful, mad American locomotive? You never were no locomotive, sunflower. You were a sunflower. This verse concretizes reality, placing bounds between objects that cannot shift identities. What this suggests is something is, in fact, real to this sense of being. Are we humans dreaming we are butterflies, or butterflies dreaming of our humanity? Asks a Zen riddle. Ginsberg writes in Butterfly Mind that, quote, each flutter, each pause a part of the whole, the butterfly mind a mirror of the universe, end quote. This reflection on the riddle of timeless being reminds readers that all is interconnected. Therefore, such a riddle rather points towards ultimate reality rather than posits a literal transformation. These verses confound reality, suggesting metaphysical veils encase the physical world of objects akin to a dream. However, no matter how good the world is, the choice of evil exists. Ultimately, God's will prevails, and all secrets swept under bring comeuppance. Try as we may, shadows dissolve with exposure to light. Shadows are analogous to obstruction of one thing by another where light seeks the floor. Evil often cancels evil in spiritual warfare. However, darkness does not compound to darkness. Complete absence of light is emptiness where no form is permitted. The dialectic between good and evil grants shape and form to a world that clutches darkness like a security blanket. This dialectical struggle brings self-consciousness through motion. A pure contradiction self-defeats, and this is what evil is. Evil is not the absence of light. One cannot define something as the absence of its opposite without tautology. Evil is a chain of self-effacing contradiction. It is tautological. It is absurdity. Absurdity is not evil in itself. Absurdity is masked insolence. Human comedy made tragic, and hypocrisy facing its own double-edged sword. Even horror and revulsion are pure pragmatic responses in a world of excess. In a world of excess, tautology abounds. To cite W.H. Auden, who first wrote as a convinced Marxist and later as a Christian humanist, quote, evil is unspectacular and always human, and shares our bed and eats at our own table, end quote. He wrote this in Herman Melville, a poem from 1933. This binary of good and evil is immensely human and often subtle in its doings. Akin to the principles of yin and yang, good and evil can resemble one another and even act in concert. This binary is part of creating the whole universe. Proverbs 8:13 from Christian scriptures note that, quote, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, end quote. Chapter 16, verse 7 of the Bhagavad Gita is also psychologically illuminating. Quote, those who are demoniac do not know what is to be done and what is not to be done. Neither cleanliness nor proper behavior nor truth is found in them, end quote. The Quran states, quote, when you see them, their appearance impresses you, and when they speak, you listen to their impressive speech. But they are just like worthless planks of wood leaned against a wall. They think every cry is against them. They are the enemy, so beware of them. May Allah condemn them. How can they be deluded from the truth? End quote. What other ways are these conflicted principalities expressed and in combat? One potential facet of expression is the arts, particularly the literary arts. Globally, the arts bridge cultures and people. As a form of communication, artistic pursuits invoke freedom and danger simultaneously through the weighing of ideas. Artists are products of their time. Picasso says of an artist, quote, he is also a political being, constantly aware of the heartbreaking, passionate, or delightful things that happen in the world, shaping himself completely in their image, end quote. No artist is born in a vacuum, and in fact, nature abhors a vacuum. Pascal, the famous Christian philosopher, writes, quote, "The strength of a man's virtue should not be measured by his special actions, but by his habitual acts," end quote. The act of utilizing one's emotional conflicts and ill will to create art and dialogue about contemporary issues is an act of genuine virtue because it is non-invasive and in accordance with reason. For the artist, the creative process is a habitual act. Literary art is a dialogue and an introduction to new concepts and possibilities. Fiction is an empathy-building tool, and poetry encourages creative thinking. As the humanities disappear from university curriculum, the world succumbs to authoritarian regimes and violence. According to Economic Intelligence Unit, more than 1/3 of the world currently lives under authoritarian regimes. Political violence is now almost normal in the United States. From 2012 to 2022, bachelor's degrees in the humanities declined by 24% nationwide, according to American Academy of Arts and Sciences. STEM fields have grown substantially, likely because of economic gains. Humanities degrees, while creating good, conscious citizens, do not help repay student loan debt once entering the career space. The Hetchinger report suggests the humanities are important because they teach, quote, how to communicate effectively, think critically, work in teams, and be able to figure out a way to solve complex problems outside of a particular area of expertise, end quote. These skills apparently don't attract much of an interest. At this time of heated political divisiveness, don't these skills seem like rational responses to the world today? During this period of authoritarian, anti-democratic sentiment, seem lacking. Serious open discussion is lacking. From personal experience, I find some causes of this breakdown to be fear of social repercussions, ubiquitous media influence, poorly principled and bad faith cliches, and the drastic changes in leadership styles. To escape these things, a citizen must be fearless, flexible, and responsive to opponents. Armed with correct principles and empathy, this citizen can influence his or her peers and call out toxic reasoning. Also, the abundance of free information and internet culture is ruining the concept of expertise and artisanship. William Deresrich offers this statement in regard to the purpose of artistic creation. Quote, "Forget selling art in order to live. What about doing art in order to imagine new? What are we capable of when economic uncertainty no longer dominates our relationships to all forms of labor and creation?" End quote. In his book, The Death of the Artist, he argues that the digital age has made creating arts more dangerous due to the economic uncertainty. He argues that digital creators in the modern age no longer put the 10,000 hours of work in to gain artistic pursuit. Rather, they diversify their credentials by participating in multiple crafts without the specialized knowledge of a craftsman. He argues that the solitary genius is an outdated concept, replaced by networking and the creative entrepreneur. He also states separately, quote, "No real excellence, personal or social, artistic, philosophical, scientific, or moral can arise without solitude," end quote. What happened to the solitary genius of the past? The rise of the layman expert, social media, the digitally driven artist, the capping of the humanities, the decline of wealth among lower rung classes, and the ascendance of STEM professionals all create an environment of economic uncertainty, lack of connection and meaning, and the Dunning-Kruger effect among the multitudes. This instills resentment and social frustration that leads to the discrediting of democratic norms, as well as normalization of narcissistic attitudes. True democratic individualism should embrace virtue, creativity, and cosmopolitanism. The world we live in today simply lacks the maturity and courage to face the dangerous path it carves for itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pickering, for such a thoughtful lecture where you explored the intersection of religion and various concepts, citing Max Weber, Annie Bradstreet, T.S. Eliot, Octavio Paz, and many more. You have discussed themes of providence, morality, love, and self-discovery, highlighting the complexities of religious perspectives. You also highlighted the importance of mystery in allowing for continuous creation and discovery, enabling humanity's ongoing pursuit of understanding. Thank you so much for your engaging and very enlightening lecture. Now, it is my great honor to introduce our next speaker, Professor Sharmistha Chatterjee, ma'am, who is a professor and head at the Department of English, Alia University, West Bengal, India. She has been the coordinator of the university research programs in the year 2022. Her areas of interest include South Asian literature, translation studies, post-colonialism, partition, green humanities, gender studies, and English language teaching. She is currently an aviation English trainer and rater under Airports Authority of India, Ministry of Aviation, Government of India. She has authored and edited books, penned articles, and has been a trainer and resource person in many faculty development programs. Professor Chatterjee has over 56 invited lectures to her credit. Her recent publications are an edited book, English Communication, published by Cambridge, UK, and a chapter titled Her Story, Scripting the Nation in the Works of Contemporary Women from Bangladesh and Pakistan, in the anthology Nationhood and the Indian Subcontinent, Contemporary Cultural Reflections, published by CLTCS NSOU. Now, I would like to request Professor Sharmistha Chatterjee, ma'am, for her very engaging lecture. Ma'am, please.
Thank you, Dr. Paramita, for that very generous introduction and those kind words. I think I'll take a minute if I can share a presentation with you while I talk, which will probably help a bit more in understanding what I say. So just give me a few minutes for a second.
Absolutely.
Can you see? Okay. So once again, you see, I should say before I speak that I'm humbled. I'm humbled when I have heard, after I have heard Mr. Pickering, and I've learned a lot in the sense that the way we've actually related religion to the maladies of the contemporary world and how we have actually moved away from the original teachings and the philosophies, and how You have showed a very important part and idea that how we are moving into the STEM education and thereby how humanities is losing its effectiveness. Yes, true. So, you see, uh, I will be speaking on something which is probably a very microcosmic part of what you have been saying, and I'll be speaking primarily on drama, and I'll be trying to link, uh, the ecosophical perspective, comparative perspectives, which are there in very select few, texts of the East and the West. So uh, again, a minute just to adjust. And so my title, which basically I have put, is as it goes, and as you see, between managerial and radical ecology, philosophical perspective of select 20th century playwrights from the West and the East. And I must admit that this is a very experimental kind of a talk where I have tried to find answers to a couple of questions while I tried to make this a comparative study. So I have asked as to how is the physical nature understood in civilizations. I think a lot of it has already been shared by Mr. Pickering in this very, very enlightening talk. And as you see, how it is depicted in the literary representations, in my case, it becomes the drama. And as I will try to explain to you, these philosophical perspectives in the East and the West, or are they moving towards the same point of convergence? Is there a pattern of development to the passage of time? So, pardon me, I have been slightly, random in my choice, and I have gone by sort of a logic. I have tried to choose certain texts which are there in the syllabi of the Indian universities, and a few of them are even outside the syllabus. So I have tried to create a sort of a familiarity. So while I have tried to trace a pattern of development, I have tried to question that is this consistent or chaotic, and again questioning that is the trajectory the same, and if they are not the same, then why? And as you see, that do they point out to very radically different definitions of ecology, which is very closely related to ecosophy and ecoethics, and then what is the balancing line? So this is the plan. So I introduce and then I go on to an understanding of ecosophy, and as the concepts which are now emerging, very managerial and radical. And why I explain, I try to understand this from the perspective of intrinsic and instrumental value, which is a very old concept that, how do we basically value things? So, and from there, you see, I see a kind of a trajectory of the West and the East. And then I try to understand, I talk about the sources, why such kind of concepts have emerged and the impact and the conflicts or the binaries, which again, Pickering sir was talking about, and if there's a possible pragmatic remedy. So I move in therefore by citing an example of 1900. You see, Anton Chekhov play Three Sisters, basically, which I lovingly teach in my classroom, and that is from where the idea emerged. And there you see a character named Vershinin. He praises a provincial town in Russia which is situated beside a river. So the Three Sisters have actually relocated, and this town is beside a river, and the dialogue goes like this, quote, "But what a magnificent wide river you have here. It's a splendid river." And this is quickly, you see, dismissed by Olga, who retorts. Olga doesn't like this new location of theirs, and I quote, Yes, but it's so cold here and there are mosquitoes, so much like probably our place in India, unquote. So this little exchange gave me the idea that this can serve as a classic example of how human beings accept or dismiss the same physical nature around them and define what is famously a term which is used oikos, which means the household or nature, their largest homestead. So the value or the moral status of the environment and its non-human contents in the lives of the human beings indicate a state of being of human life too. Thus, for Bershinin, living in the provincial town becomes a liberal or a liberating, experience of freedom. While for the three sisters, and this is Olga, Masha, and Irina, to name them, it becomes a stifling experience or a space of inconvenience. From there, you see, if we go on, I quote Felix Kathari, again, philosopher in fashion nowadays, and I try to understand whether this can be linked to his thoughts. So this complex ethico-political articulation, one might add aesthetical, philosophical, is described by Kathari as ecosophy. For Kathari, as you see, ecosophy is the articulation between three ecological registers: the environment, social relations, and human subjectivity. And it is supremely important to understand the significance of this concatenation, the interaction in human lives. And again, as understood by this Swiss intellectual, Yves Setten, and I quote, individuals do not pre-exist the relations that say shape them, unquote. So we have to understand, therefore, the attention that the ecosophy draws, that if we are a product of the interaction between these three ideas, then there must be a plurality of ecologies, environments, and habitat. And if we go, you see, by Kathari and Sitton's beliefs, then we must understand that if we again believe that, as Mr. Pickering was also trying to point out, that if art becomes a reflection and criticism of life, then Bershinin and Olga, these individuals in the cultural representation of the drama of Chekhov, are products of this interaction among the river that flows, the mutual relationship, and the general genetic and subjective disposition. So as creatures, the meaning, the make of their lives, and the happiness quotient is dependent on this interaction. And I think that if students are listening to me, if at all, you know that very oft-quoted idea from Milton that mind is its own place and can make a hell of heaven and a heaven of hell. So might be, partially we can link that too with this very upcoming idea of ecosophy. So I quote again, you see, from the news and Kathari. It means, therefore, unquote, relationalism has an ecosophical value because it dispels the belief that entities or people can be isolated from the environment. Talking about interaction between entities and an environment leads to misconceptions because an entity is an interaction. But the entity is definitely, therefore, a product, but it is also a process, as we will try to understand. So ecosophy, therefore, draws our attention to the plurality of ecologies, environments, habitats that do not surround us as a container with its contents, but that which define us, each of us as we are, and how we as human beings constantly define and reconfigure So there's also the process involved, reconfigured in a network of relations. So as we go on, you see, and as we understand that entities are products of a given interaction and at the same time a process subject to flux and eternal change, which are configured in a network of relations, two major kinds of ecologies emerge in the world. So this is once again a way of understanding. You see, in no way will this work claim or this lecture claim that this is the one way to understand. This is a way to understand how you see we are tackling ecologies and corresponding philosophies. So two ways or the two kinds of ecologies that emerge in the world, the Western, primarily Western. And again, you see, when we say Western, it doesn't give the fact or it doesn't assume that all the West is like this, but largely. So Western or the managerial, it seeks to cut down the consumption of resources. And yes, it seeks to cut down, true, and reduce the environmental impact of modes of production and consumption with the purpose to extend and homogenize the same lifestyle, again, this part, and modes of production among the emerging nations. So you see, it's a kind of a continuation. So we take the same model, and we take the same concept or same idea in claiming the durable and the sustainable manner. So this, you see, an extended attempt, which again, therefore, is no environmental wisdom or Sophia, rather the last attempt to save what we can understand as a mutated or modified form of capitalistic development. Other ecology, or you see what we can understand from Guattari as the radical one, from where ecosophy stems, refers to a more generalized social, political, and economic existential crisis. They cannot be solved by ad hoc measures to safeguard natural environments. It recommends changing social practices and adopting alternative life conditions. So this is where you see the idea of reconfiguration probably tries to come in the process, that are better suited to local-based but global planetary problems. So local problems, which can be understood as a part of the larger problems, and how you see there can be local solutions, but at the same time you see as in a Venn diagram, the whole actually contains the part. So there must be a local solution to a local problem, which can contribute to a global solution. So this allows us to escape not only the unsustainable, but also the unwanted nature of development system that encourages the manufacture of infelicity, and the term would mean inappropriate way of acting upon the environment or interaction with the environment. So looking now into the attempts of the select 20th century playwrights, we need to understand each of them foregrounded in ecosophy even before the term was designed. And I admit that this is a new term, and which I try to apply and see and look into also the older kind of artistic and creative products. So designed to represent the ecology in the work. So for the Western playwrights, it was largely the managerial one, as I said, based on, and as Pickering sir was talking for such a long time, the scriptural belief, which actually stems, of course, yes, from the Holy Bible, wherein you see the hierarchy. In the hierarchy, the man was at the apex. And if we try to, you see, understand, and this is a kind of an image, an old painting, you know, of a very commonly understood play, Riders to the Sea. So in this popular drama, you see, by Singe, and this is just a passing reference, the sea becomes an enemy because it is untamable. And yet no alternative life condition is hinted at, because the relationship of the humans with the sea and among themselves is not reconfigured. And I feel, and I see, you see, that the end of the riders to the sea slowly moved towards a modified, again, microcosmic capitalistic economy, where Maurya's son need to go to Galway to sell the horses at a fair, hinting at the failure of a sustainable, self-sufficient lifestyle. For those students, I remind you, you know that there is this cock and the kelp in the island, but those things, you know, they fail to sustain the life, which looks at a kind of a contact point with the mainland. So it's no longer self-sufficient. It again is moving. And again, as we move on in the neighborhood, not the near neighborhood, in the neighborhood around the same time, so trying to bring in the time zone. Again, this is a Chekhovian play, hints at a dying feudal structure. Again, the same kind of a transition, which is then slowly yielding to again a same kind of bourgeois, self-aggrandizing, profit-making motive. And Chekhov's play subtly captures the process of, I again borrow this idea of early deterritorialization. Again, you see a delusion concept that capitalism produces with the estate of Mrs. Ranevsky up on sale. So the estate of which actually is the cherry orchard is on sale. Act 1 of the play shows the estate of the cherry orchard with its trees in full bloom, with the poorer characters like Ria Pikodov or Furs excited over the spectacle. And these characters are basically those characters which are dying. In fact, Furs tries to remember the traditional utility of the cherries. Herein, you know, we will definitely look into the idea of instrumental value. But definitely Furs tries to remember this, you know, the utility of the cherries in order to save the orchard, while the ineffective last landowner, Mrs. Ranevsky, broods over the changing ways in Paris. Lopakin, who actually buys the orchard and is a manager and was an earlier serf in the literal sense, buys the orchard, which had defined the identity of all people who inhabit that space. Act 2 of the cherry orchard records the abandoned nature. A tumble-down chapel, dark poplar trees, large stones like old tombstones, and the intrusion of railways. A very typical image, I think all students over here, if they are, will understand what the intrusion of the railways would mean in case of both the real life and the literature, okay, which was the first time when, as English students, we read about this in the Victorian age, how you see the intrusion of railways was bringing in the change. So Furs laments the axe striking a tree. It sounds lonely and sad, and he's ill. Chekhov suggests no reconfiguration, at least for the displaced, rather hints at what Antonioli suggests, the beginning of a process of generalized re-territorialization based on polarization, rich, poor, integration, disintegration. Having looked into an Irish-Russian dramatist early, we can sit down a couple of years with Pygmalion, you know, very well-known play by the Irish-English dramatist George Bernard Shaw. You see, as I was saying that before we move into this, we also have to understand the deep, profound impact of the idea of instrumental value and intrinsic value in understanding ecosophy of the current times and also through the 20th century. So whereas instrumental value would refer to valuing nature as means to an end, intrinsic value transforms non-human entities as ends in themselves. So in this sense, sea in Riders to the Sea, the river in the Three Sisters, or the cherry orchard in the eponymous play, do not have instrumental value, and because the overarching Western ethical perspectives do not acknowledge intrinsic value, the non-human entities having no utility are avoided and disposed of. It is to be noted that the Holy Bible, Book 1, Genesis mentions that non-human life was created for the promotion and for the use of the humans, and that Adam is to be the Lord of all non-human life. Aristotle further, for example, in Politics, Book 1, Chapter 8, apparently maintains, and I quote, nature has made all things specifically for the sake of man, unquote. So this kind of a teleological thought is ultimately anthropocentric and pushes the idea that non-human life is ultimately only instrumental in human life. The 1916 play Pygmalion is a case where the same managerial eco-ethics is applied to reconfigure the identity of a flower girl. And why I have used these editions is because, you see, I wanted the participants to have a look at the way you see these visuals, have been foregrounded, and how you see the flowers are juxtaposed by with a very urban setting, the hat and the scarf and a lady, and how we understand her and this strange interaction and how she becomes ultimately the other in this particular setting. So the same, you see, as I was saying, managerial eco-ethics is applied to reconfigure the identity of flower girl, and we all know Eliza Doolittle in an urban scape. In early 20th century England, as we know, rains were always troublesome because of the perennial nature, just as the flowers of the flower girl selling them by the street. After, as we know, an accidental collision with Freddie, the flowers are all scattered and no one looks back to pick them up. Eliza Doolittle is not the solitary reaper of birds. She's rather, and again, if I might use the word, deterritorialized other, with no riches and money. Like flowers, read nature, she is abused because she is plain, not at all romantic. I'm quoting from the text, wears a hat of straw, which has been exposed to dust and soot of London. And compared to other ladies, she's very dirty. This is the quote. She is very dirty. And more so because she speaks a non-standard dialect. And there's a quote, a woman who utters such depressing and disgusting sounds has no right to be anywhere in the native language of Shakespeare and Milton. Depreciation of nature and woman, as is understood vis-a-vis appreciation of nurture and man, is evident throughout the play. Eliza's random picking up for experiment by a learned professor from the elite class is compared to the insensitive picking of eggs from a bird's nest. And Pickering says, they found a nest with 4 eggs in it, Higgins. They took 1 piece and left the 3 in it. And when Mrs. Pierce, who is the housekeeper, she protests, you can't take a girl up as if you are picking a pebble on a beach. Professor Higgins retorts, why not? The entire project of robbing away the tongue. So it's also the idea of the language which is the natural source of, the natural tool, I would say, of expression. The natural part of the identity of the poor girl at the altar of science, experiment, and nurture is comparable to, I think, with the thoughts of the eco-feminists who cry for the justice of women or for the white man's burden to civilize the natives. Only in this case, it is the patriarchal society which is in operation. It above all throws lights on the gimmicks in the name of development and durability, and foresees what Sheila Collins, for instance, argues as, quote, male-dominated culture or patriarchy is supported by 4 interlocking pillars: sexism, racism, class exploitation, ecological destruction, unquote. If one shifts one's attention, so these are a few of the plays, once again, you see, which in this timeline, you see, which I have picked sort of, with a kind of a logic that they are close to the syllabus. And on the other hand, I try to place these plays with the other side, 1922, 1924, the plays with the pioneer of the East, Tagore. So if we shift our attention at the same time to the East and on the same time, and a couple of years later, 2 plays of Tagore, very familiar plays, very well known, Muktodhara, translated as the waterfall in 1922 and the red oleanders 1925, they evince the other kind of philosophy, or the ecosophy, sorry, as I argue, the radical ecosophy, which recommends, in the words of Kothari, promoting any new practices. And see, the kind of practices that are foregrounded would include slowing down, short cycles. By short cycles, we would mean, you see, molecular, microcosmic processes of change, not huge kind of changes, pooling knowledge, pooling indigenous knowledge and creativity, downsizing, the idea of minimalism, downsizing new production and consumption paradigms that allow us to, quote, enhance the links to each other and to our environment, thereby generating a kind of an ecosophy. We might here remember and acknowledge that India and the East did still adhere to the agrarian economy during the time. That is, the two plays were to warn capitalism and its greed was slowly bearing its fangs, and one of the sure ways to augment it was by menacling nature. So Muktodhara, which literally translates as the free stream, has been manacled by the engineer Vibhuti, who has created a machine, for those of you who have read, to bound up the waterfall of Muktodhara. Young men of the land are kidnapped for building the embankment, and people are deprived of the free water, food prices becoming dearer as Vibhuti quotes, I quote, "My object was to make man triumphant over the sands and water and stones which conspired against them. My machine has triumphed over the cries of hunger, mother's curse," unquote. However, as the ecosophy of Tagore and the East would have resounded, the Crown Prince Abhijit frees the waterfall as he gets drowned in the process. He saves the people of Shintarai from perpetual famine. Tagore celebrates the death of the Crown Prince by declaring him one with nature. When we move into the understanding of Tagore by a very important environmentalist of the contemporary times, Ramchandra Guha, is also a historian. So, according to him, in Guha, in Tagore, we see the earliest Indian, and I quote, "precocious environmentalists who truly knew local traditions, local solutions to global problems." However, unlike Gandhi, who vehemently dismissed, so Gandhi actually in Hind Swaraj, he dismisses India's taking over to industrialization after the manner of the West. Tagore worked his way towards what we can call a scientific conservation. That was a kind of balancing, a vision where technological innovations would serve humans and harmonize with nature rather than dominate them both utterly. There's a passage where Tagore's ship, while he was touring to Japan, entering Penang, was suggested. And I have put up on the slide the quote. So what is important in this long quote, I would say that the last line, "A steamship has many advantages over a sailing vessel, but the beauty has been lost." Tagore was perhaps the earliest person in the East who thought in terms of scientific conservation, as is evident also in Nandini's warning in the play Red Oleanders in 1925. The living heart of earth gives itself up in love and life and beauty. But when you rend its bosom and disturb the dead, you bring up with your booty the curse of its demon, blind and hard and cruel and envious. Initially, though the red oleanders plant is hidden away behind the rubbish heap, the character of Nandini, the feminine energy and the symbol of nature, fights against the cruelties of the emperor who subjugates and oppresses common humans and gets them out through the mountain for gold. Nandini is able to explain the reason why the king is apathetic to the mountain and the trees, as she looks into herself and says, I quote, "Because I serve no purpose of his." This is precisely the debate we refer to while judging the instrumental and the intrinsic value of nature. Yet, unlike the flower girl in Pygmalion, Nandini refuses to be broken into pieces and operates in a mode where the king gets fascinated with the fear of Nandini, that which might give the nascent ideas of the ego-Gothic again, the fear unleashed by the oppressed. Instead of allowing the machine power to conquer, Kishore, Nandini, and others resist the tyranny, resulting in the freedom of the slaves in the gold mines and the destruction of the city of Yakshan. Yet in the process, Nandini herself dies, a price which needs to be paid for all worthwhile freedom to be achieved. This slowing down and resistance of a growing urban space to suit local ends is the characteristic of Eastern thoughts, which find its roots in the Upanishads and other scriptural texts. The hierarchical dualism of the West is replaced with a perspective of universal unity, which in turn may be derived from the idea of Advaita or non-dualism. Mr. Pickering was referring to the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads too, which is inspired by the Upanishads. So again, we look into the same kinds of ideas, since the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita uphold the unity of humans and other natural entities, which are but two categories of manifestations of the same reality, the Brahman. It is said that from the body of the Purusha, the Brahman, the reality, Shodosh Kala, or the 16 parts originate. The 16 parts include both animate and inanimate entities that the world is made up of. The Upanishads say, and I quote, he, Purusha, created prana. From prana, he created faith, space, air, water, earth, organs, mind, food. From food, he created vigor, self-control, mantras, rites, words, and a name in the world. Unquote. Recent scholars like Lawrence Sullivan therefore believe that ecology demands the insight of unity to be found in the Upanishads. This would make us understand that why, even in the post-war, and this is the last part of my thought, I would say, not an argument, straight thoughts. Okay, so in the post-war, postmodern world, the dramatists of the East try to continue depicting the ecosophy of the search for unity and wholeness and alignment with nature, even the challenge with the sense of fragmentation, insecurity, and alienation. Thus, from the 1950s to the 1980s, post-war theater in the West exhibited major dramatists, which are again, Pinter or Osborne, who struggle with the reinvention of individuals of collective existential territories in accordance with intrinsic link between humanity and biosphere, whereas the Indian and the Eastern counterparts try to find the same. And by Eastern counterparts, I name Girish Karna to be one of them, is probably able to do in a manner in plays like Hayavadana 1975 or Fire and the Rain 1998. So in the Hayavadana, I think I'll take 5 minutes more. So in the Hayavadana, thus the forest becomes a setting or a space where human conflicts and desires are mediated by impartial and transformative power of nature, challenging the rigid constructs of identity. Similarly, the horsehead, or the incomplete self, signifies humanity's estrangement from nature and the inner turmoil resulting from this connection. The horsehead's desire to become a complete horse thus becomes the quest for wholeness and reconciliation with one's fundamental nature. Similarly, The Fire and the Rain, 1998, similarly depicts the eternal cyclical interplay of destruction and redemption in nature, which includes human life. Karna's anthropomorphism in his plays thus serve as an ecological spiritual parable, as opposed to the plays written and acted at the same time in the West, which can at best look at the Edwardian twilight, look back, as in Osborne's Look Back in Anger, 1965. The dramatists fail to evolve ecosophies in the increasingly complex technosphere which surrounds them, as perceived by Guattari. The global networking of urban areas has, on one hand, homogenized the equipment, communication, and transportation means, lifestyles, and mindsets of globalized elites. On the other hand, this has increased the differences between habitat areas. The old center suburban structure has been deeply transformed, as has given rise to three-way segmentation between over-equipped and over-connected urban areas, lackluster middle-class residential areas, and increasingly more prevalent poverty belts all over. Pinter and Osborne choose to reinforce managerial ecology by revealing in these technospheres and urban spheres the sites of complex power struggles. I would like you also to look to the popular editions and the cover pages. So vis-a-vis the cover pictures of the earlier Hayavadana and Far on the Rain. So as you see, sites of complex power struggles, existential anxieties, and creating an uncanny under the rubric of violence and kitchen sink realism. The hierarchy of dualism obfuscates all non-human forms of life and promotes issues related only to humans. If ever dominated rustic people and their language do become a subject, as in Pinter's, as I show over here, the mountain language, much later play 1988, these are doomed to be suppressed and undermined in a strange prison setting following the Western parallels. I think, conclude and I leave room for thought, I think, for questions and probably non-consensus, I would say, that there's a need to still initiate ecosophical reconversion, which will push for the development of new aesthetical, ecological, and social living paradigms based on collective thinking of ushering practical solutions. Both the East and the West, as we see through, as a representation in these texts randomly, chosen through a particular timeline. The East, while it is still ensconced in such dialogues, the West is making moves with ventures such as disability theatre. I was so delighted to know that Mr. Pickering works on disability theatre, vulnerability studies of low humanities. But both the East and the West, they need to do probably beyond the lip service. And you see, we'll have to push towards a radical ecology and corresponding ecosophy. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for such a knowledgeable lecture where you discussed ecosophy, highlighting the diversity of ecologies and environments that shape human identity. You contrasted Western managerial ecology with the radical ecology, which advocates for changing social practices. And I believe such knowledgeable lectures encourages us to think more and ask questions too. We have few questions from our participants. I would like to request our participants to ask their questions. Please unmute yourself. Yes, Madhvanti Ganguly ma'am.
Hello, good
Yes,
afternoon,
ma'am.
all of you. My name is Madhubanti Ganguly. I am from Political Science Department in the university. First of all, I want to convey my gratitude towards the distinguished speakers. It was really illuminating, so thank you very much. My question, rather query, is to Mr. Dustin Picker. Sir, you have talked about the concept of scientific incompleteness. Since science itself has its limits, how can we as a global community keep moving forward together while recognizing that our knowledge will always be incomplete? So can you explain it?
That's a very good question. The best answer I could probably give is that science
Okay.
adapts itself to contemporary issues. And a lot of times at least I've noticed in my readings of science, there's the old saying, I can't remember who it was, said, that science advances one funeral at a time. So all concepts sort of survive their utility, and then there's a lot of little problems that kind of converge and create a their own new paradigms. I mean, Max Planck is an example I gave. He was told by one of his professors that don't go into physics, that everything's been done, and then he discovers that there's an entire element to physics that had not been had not even been recognized prior to his discovery of them. So I think the main thing, there are limitations to our understanding and knowledge, and there's always this vast unknown out there. And I think what the best answer I could give to your question is that we adapt to contemporary issues. We recognize there are things going on in our world that need our reconciliation, and then we kind of develop our knowledge from that point forward. And of course, that's going to create its own problematics and issues that we emerge in the future, and then we adapt to that. So I think there's always this human restlessness is going to be to our knowledge is always going to be a thing with humanity. So I think that's the best answer I could give. Hopefully I gave
yes, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madhubanti Ganguly ma'am, and thank you, Dustin Pickering sir. Now I can see another raised hand. Yes, Mr. Vishwajit Prasad.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes,
All
sir.
of you? Yeah. Good afternoon, all of you. I am Vishwajit Prasad. I am the guest faculty member of the Hindi University of Department of Political Science. So basically, I have enjoyed very much today's talk on the greater theme of the comparative world literature, and also I am very much thankful to Professor Nandini Sahu madam and also the Hindi University to organize these kinds of talk, which is more on interdisciplinary method, and all we in the social science department's faculty member and the students will also get helpful from these kinds of topics. So thanks to Dr. Pickering sir and also Sharmistha madam. So basically I have any question, but I have some query regarding the Sharmistha ma'am's lecture. So basically, you have outlined the idea of the ecosophy, and this is the very great term that you have mentioned, ecosophy, eco, and the in our political science discipline we have lot of examples in the ecology and the how the ecosystem is actually worked in the political institution or the political process. And also we have heard in the in our gender studies papers also there are ecofeminism and all. So in my perspective, or in my on my limited area of the literature and these kinds of idea, so my query is how we can relate to this as a climate change perspective, or how as we have seen in the lower southern West Bengal or the eastern part of the India, that more on we can like challenging situation in the climate change, where in the Sundarban areas, and also in there are good number of researchers are doing there in the climate change perspective. So how that you have mentioned through the novels and the writings of east and the west part. So like in the political perspective or in the eco-feminist perspective, how we can relate to this kind of climate change or climate ecology kind of perspective with relate to your that kind of literary idea. This is my actually the question. So I hope I in the good way I have
Yes,
exempted.
So
Okay. Thank you.
thank you for that question. I would say the other way around. It goes the other way around. That climate change and related. You see how the political changes, the legal moves. You see how the policies they have affected the whole world, and how you see we from the literatures. See, we try to play a meaningful role. And when we try to play a meaningful role, you see, we cannot play a meaningful role in the sense of, you see, how science would play, or how you see changes in probably conservation methods in the scientific sense of the term. We cannot contribute in that sense. But what we can do is basically we can raise an awareness, a very informed awareness, where you see, I give you an example that, say, in these parts, say, South Asian parts, there is one very, you see, popular author nowadays, Amitabh Ghosh, who is, I
Yes.
would say, you must be aware. So because, he's this popular author, so I'm referring to him. He writes a book called Great Derangement, which has nothing to do
Yes.
with
Yes, ma'am.
literature. Yes. So although you see he's known uh, as a novelist, okay. So when he's writing The Great Derangement, he is basically writing a very informed uh, idea of the climate change, okay, and how you see this climate change is affecting everything, including you see our way of looking into and interacting with our environment, and how you see, I would again relate how what Mr. Pickering was talking about, that you see with the change in the climate as well as which is related to the policies, which is related to the legal activities, there is
Yes,
a shift
absolutely.
from the humanities, okay, shift from the humanities to a kind of an education or a kind of a system where you see we are moving slowly towards what nowadays in these parts is called the gig economy, GIG. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it right.
Yes, yes,
The gig
absolutely.
economy,
Yeah.
where you see people are leaving the kind of studies which are related to, the high profile humanities in the literary sense. Maybe what I was talking about, no longer anybody is interested in that. Okay? People are interested more in kind of studies which will help them to survive in a world. You were referring to the Sundarbans, okay, where you see rapidly the habitat is changing, rapidly the livelihood, the ways and the means of livelihood is changing. That literature can perhaps talk about as a warning. That you see, nobody is bothered to read about all that. But what we are doing is basically we are playing a sort of, I accept, a second fiddle, right? Reiterating and complementing to the policies and the actions which can bring down the effect, the rapid destructive effect of the policies and the human action or the anthropocentrism which is going around us. I don't know whether you have answered well, but I have tried. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
could
Yes,
I make some
of course.
sense? Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh, Ma'am, can I just say a
Yes.
few words
Yes.
regarding that gig economy? That
Yes.
even in during that, Paromita ma'am, is that as we have
Yes,
time,
sir.
like
Yes, sir.
for the
Yes, sir.
5 minutes? Yeah, just I'm sharing my in experience regarding a project on gig economy, that we are working on some project on gig economy, that gig workers, how they directly affected at the time of COVID. So basically we have done two city based survey, telephonic survey, on one in Ranchi and one in Kolkata. The both are the eastern side of the India. So basically that we have asked people that how you can survive with the gig economy. So gig economy, or the platform of this kind of economy, online platform, is not, is like, is situation is very volatile. Is they are not, that time is not providing in a good way for some kind of helping around to the to the urban company Ola, Uber. In this kind of platforms, they are not providing their substitute platform or any kind of work apart from the different kinds of what kind of thing, like they are not providing good amount of money or at that
Money
time
or
also.
any kind of,
Yes,
say any kind of support system, in
yes,
case
yes,
any
yes,
accidents occur or anything. No
yes,
support system at all.
yes.
That's
So
what the
how
documents. Yeah.
this is also kind of related to the that climate ecology or the climate change, because even we in Kolkata is situated in that very southern of the West Bengal, that is nearby to the Bay of Bengal. So if people are not very much dependent on the work that in the Sundarban area also. So this that gig economy platform is also like they are doing such kind of transformative work, but not effectively they sustain through this kind of gig platform, like in the long run. So that is my thing.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your views. And thank you, ma'am, for the valuable answer. As this interaction session brings us to the end of today's webinar on comparative world literatures, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, for her very valuable time. I thank our esteemed speakers, Mr. Dustin Pickering and Professor Sharmistha Chatterjee, for sharing their insights and expertise with us. To our lovely participants, thank you for your active participation and engagement. A special thanks to Team Hindi University. We hope you found this webinar informative and enriching. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world of literature. Thank you for joining us today. Namaste.